Right, hi everyone, and welcome to the lesson. Again, sorry I can't be with you today, but I've put this lesson onto YouTube for you to guide you through what I would like you to do for me today. Okay, so we're going to be looking at primary research methods again, but we're going to be looking at primary research methods from a different angle. So we're going to be looking at it from a sampling point of view. So this is our 7th lesson. The aims and outcomes of the session is just to continue with what we were doing before half term and provide you with knowledge and understanding of different types of primary research methods and how you can go about choosing a sample population. Now, some of these terms are going to sound weird to you because I've never mentioned them before, but by the end of this lesson, you will know what I mean by a sample population. So, first things first, we're going to do a recap, a different sort of recap today. We're just going to discuss what we looked at before half term, and then we're going to move on to looking at some key terms that are associated with primary research. So there are 12 key terms that we're going to be looking at throughout this session. I'd say half of them we've already covered, so you've got a bit of inside information already, but the other half of them are probably terms you've never heard of before. So I'm going to explain them to you in this lesson. And then finally, you're going to be set a task which involves you assessing, so looking at, like evaluating, looking at how important something is. So you're going to be assessing the importance of sampling in primary research. Really, really important lesson for the exam, this one, because in the exam you will have to look at primary research that has been carried out into a particular health and social care issue. So you might be asked to evaluate the research methods, so you would need to know about how they chose the sample so that you could then evaluate the research method. Anyway, without further ado, let's have a look at what we covered before half term. So this isn't going to take long. I'm going to talk you through what we did before half term. So in the last session before half term, we started to look at primary research methods, and you completed some exercises on this for the exam prep lesson as well. So in the main lesson, on my YouTube lesson, I focused on questionnaires, interviews, case studies and observations. And then you also looked at scientific experiments, surveys and checklists on the in your exam prep lesson as well. So you actually covered 7 different primary research methods in the week before half term. So next week, I'm going to set you some tasks just to revisit those so that you are fully aware of them and you understand them. But for today, we're going to move on to looking at some key terms associated with primary research. Remember, you can pause this video whenever you want if you need to go back and take notes. I'm probably talking a little bit fast, but like I said, pause it as and when you feel the need to. So let's have a look at the key terms associated with primary research. And then we're going to move on to the final task, which is to assess the importance of sampling in primary research. So we're going to focus on outcomes 2 and 3. Right, so key terms. So I want you to imagine if you were conducting some primary research, there are lots and lots of different factors that you need to consider. Now, you are already aware of these, so you need to look at things like the most suitable method. So are you going to choose a questionnaire? Are you going to choose a survey? Are you going to choose a case study or an observation? Yeah, so you need to decide on what the most suitable method is. You also need to decide on the type of data you want. So do you want qualitative? Do you want quantitative? Do you want to get both? But you also need to look at the sample population. So you already know about the first 2. So we're going to look at what we mean by sample population now. But before we get there, you need to be aware of a very important key term. Okay, so this is a really important key term that you need to be aware of. And that term is empirical data. So when I talk about empirical data, I want you to think about it like this. So the information or the findings that you get from doing primary research is called primary data. And primary data is also known as empirical data. So basically, whenever I say empirical data, it's a fancy way of saying primary data. Okay? And it is the information acquired by researchers through experimentation and observation. So that is what we call empirical data. And it's really, really important. It's an essential part of the primary research process. So that is your first key term. And I want to just give you an example of how important empirical data is. So imagine you wake up in the morning with a very sore throat. You feel your glands in your neck and they're all swollen and your joints are aching. So you think to yourself, I've got flu, because you've got those flu-like symptoms. So you get up, you manage to drag yourself out of bed, and you make your way to the local chemist to get some cold and flu medication. And when you get there, as I'm sure you can imagine, you'll notice there are many, many different types of medication. So you choose the one that's claiming to be the most effective because it's proven by scientific studies and experiments. So it says on the box, clinically proven to get rid of cold and flu symptoms. This has been supported by 100 people who've used this medication. So it's got all these claims that it's effective. So why would this be the one that's more likely to work? You would have chosen that one, not on a whim, not randomly, but you chose it because of those claims. And those claims are backed up by empirical data because it's claiming to be proven by scientific studies and experiments. So it's empirical data. It's got a proven track record of success, and that would be the best for you. So that is why empirical data is really important, because it means that something has been tested and it's been proven to work. Therefore, we would choose that. Okay, so I hope that kind of explains empirical data to you. So that is the first key term. But in order to find empirical data, researchers need to know who to ask or who to conduct their studies on. So this is known as the sample population. So let's now take a closer look at what this means. So, key term here for you, sampling. So whenever research is carried out in health and social care, it often involves obtaining information directly from individuals, especially when information might not be easily retrieved by other means. So it might be harder for you to get information in other ways. The easiest way to get information is by getting it directly from individuals. So a lot of researchers will gather information from a selected group of individuals who share the same characteristics. So for example, you might be carrying out some research about the experiences people have had who've had a stroke. So for example, people who've had a stroke are experienced such as people who have used services available in a health and social care centre. So I'll rephrase that because it all came out a little bit wrong. So you might gather information from a selected group of people. So for example, that might be a group of people who've had a stroke. Or you might want to gather information from people to try and find their experiences. So for example, what people thought of the services available in a healthcare centre. So this is known as your sample population. So this is like the big group of people that you want to focus your research on. And obviously the size of that sample depends on the research being carried out. It can be large, it can be small. So if we go back to my example before about people who've had a stroke, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who've had a stroke. So that would be a large sample population. Now, if you were focusing on a different illness which was not as common as a stroke, then it might be a smaller group. So once you know the sample population, you can then decide on a most suitable research method to use. So you might decide that you can't really do interviews with 100,000 people because it's not possible, but you might be able to do a questionnaire with them. So you choose the research method that allowed you to access your sample population the easiest way. Okay, so your sample population is the group of individuals targeted for investigation. Now, the sample population will be made up of people who share similar characteristics. The sample, on the other hand, is a group of people from the sample population that you choose to take part in your research. Now, just to help you get your head around that, have a look at this example. So if you were researching the experiences of people who had had a stroke, then your sample population would be everyone who had had a stroke. But that's not always going to be possible to involve each and every single person in your research, because it just would not be realistic. So what you then choose is a selection of people from that sample population, and that is what we call a sample. So your sample population is everybody who's got a stroke, who's had a stroke. Your sample might be a selection of people from that bigger group, and they're the ones who might take part in your research. So your sample is smaller. So the question is, how do we choose a sample? So there are many different ways that researchers can choose a sample, and these are called sampling techniques. And there's 4 sampling techniques listed here. There's random sampling, systematic sampling, quota sampling, and opportunity sampling. What I want you to do is I want you to pause this video now and find out what each of these sampling techniques mean. Okay? So just pause the video for 5 minutes or so and find out what they mean, and then come back and we'll quickly go through them, and then I'll set your task for the rest of this lesson. Right, welcome back everyone. So you've probably done some research now, but I'm going to go over these sampling techniques with you. So random sampling. This is one way we can choose a sample from a sample population. So as the name suggests, individuals are selected randomly. There's no planning, there's no strategics, there's no strategies. It's just literally choose them at random. So researchers might use a random number selected by a computer, or they might use numbers from a table. So let me give you an example. Suppose you had a list of 200 people on it. So your sample population consists of 200 people. You can't interview or see every single of those 200 people. So you just randomly choose numbers from it. So you might choose to have number 1, 7, 80, 34, 56, 98, 110, 167. So they are the ones that you choose. So you are just at random choosing and those numbers. Okay, so random sampling, randomly choose people. Now the thing with random sampling is you don't always know who you're going to be choosing. So for example, you might randomly choose people and it just so happens that they're all males, or they're all female, or they're all a certain age. And that's the downside to random sampling. You can't be specific as to who you want, because you're randomly choosing people and you could end up with anybody. And then that can affect the validity and the reliability of your findings. Okay, systematic sampling involves selecting individuals at regular intervals. So imagine you're outside a health and social care centre and you distribute questionnaires to every other service user who's attending that clinic. So there might be 20 people who've attended that clinic and you've given a questionnaire to every other people, so you would have given a questionnaire out to 10 people. Or you might do it like every 6th person or every 5th person or every 10th person. So that is your system. So the same like if you're doing an interview on the street or a survey on the street, you might ask every fourth person who walks past you. Okay? Now, with systematic sampling, you can focus on a particular group of people. So if you wanted to find information, say, about diabetes, then you could ask people, systematically who were attending a GP practice for diabetes. Quota sampling requires the researcher to select a predetermined number of individuals from representative groups. Now, these are quite common to be used for opinion polls. So it could be according to age, area of the country where they live, their socioeconomic profile, so how much money they've got, and what sort of job they do, whether they're male, whether they're female, whether they're transgender. So quota sampling is where you look at a predetermined number of people from a particular group. So you might say, right, okay, I want to look at the opinions of females. So I'm going to ask 20 females, or I'm going to ask 20 males, or I'm going to ask 20 people under the age of 18. Or maybe I'm going to ask people who are from the north or the south. So quota sampling. And finally, opportunity sampling involves researchers handing out questionnaires to individuals who happen to be passing by at the time. So you are taking, an opportunity to give somebody a questionnaire. So an example of this could be standing outside the entrance to a hospital on a particular day and just simply handing out questionnaires to anyone who will take a copy. So you've probably experienced this yourself. Somebody just asks you, will you complete this questionnaire for me? Or have you got a moment to take part in a survey? Or have you got a moment for me to ask you a few questions? So it's just pure opportunity driven in the hope that people will complete them. Okay, so they are your 4 sampling techniques. Now, when you choose a sample technique, or if you were a researcher, a lot goes into it which you don't really need to know about for this module, but I just want you to be aware that it's important that the sample represents a good cross-section of the sample population. So, a good representation of males and females, transgender, a good representation of different age groups, a good representation of, people from different backgrounds, different religions, because then you can compare all the information you get and then come to a conclusion and that conclusion will be based on the opinions of people who represent all the different types of people that live in society. Now, some sampling techniques don't always allow that to happen, like random sampling or opportunity sampling doesn't always allow you to be more specific about the people you ask. Now, that can have an impact on the validity and the reliability of the results, as we've looked at in previous lessons. Okay, so here's a summary of the key terms and the key words that we have discussed over the last 20 minutes. So we've looked at the terms research method, data, qualitative, quantitative, empirical data, sample population, sampling technique, random sampling, systematic sampling, quota sampling, and opportunity sampling. So your task, and this is a tough task, right? And this is going to be very, very similar to the sort of things you'll have to do for the exam, because you are going to have to write sort of essay style answers in the exam. So I want to get you used to writing essays for me. So I am going to set you a task for the rest of this lesson. You are to write an essay. Now, the essay title is Assess the Importance of Sampling in Primary Research. So you're basically writing me an essay telling me why sampling is important in primary research. So everything we've discussed, all those 12 key terms listed on this slide, need to be included in this essay. Now, I think this essay should be, for a good essay, at least 500 words. So I'm setting you a minimum word count of 500. You must contain references, so you need to tell me where you got your information from. So that is what I would like you to do for the rest of this lesson. I'm going to let you get on with that now. I will be available to speak to you on Teams if you need any help or support. But what I do ask is you try to do this as best as you can without asking me for any help, because I'm not going to be sat with you in the exam to answer your questions. So if you can get used to doing things off your own back and kind of on your own initiative a little bit, then that will be really good experience for the exam. But please, please, please don't think I'm not going to be here. I am still here. You can ask me questions if you want, but try and answer them yourself, or try and speak to your classmates. I know it's not easy whilst we're all online, but maybe use chat facilities on Teams to message each other, to help each other out. Okay, so that's your task for today. Good luck with it. Any questions, then just get back to me, obviously, if you can't answer them yourselves. And then I would like your essays to be submitted to me via Teams. And I'm going to give you until the end of the week to get that done, because it might be a lot of work for you. So get those to me by the end of the week. Submit them onto Teams. Okay? I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.